Hello, everyone. I see people are joining now. Um, Welcome to the May stream. As always, please let me know if audio and video are good so that we can move on. Hello. Yes. Um, Nice to see you guys. It is, it's getting really, really hot here in Lisbon, Portugal, and I have a fan running. I've not been wearing a t-shirt all day, so I had to make sure to get a fan going to survive. Um, hope hope that you guys are not melting where you're from. Okay, bunch of people saying everything is good. Greetings from Germany. Well, greetings from Portugal. Um, yes, and cool. More people are joining. I think at this point we can start. Yeah, yeah. At this point we can start, and yeah, let's just go for it. Okay, so what do we got today? Couple of small things, couple of big things. I will try to keep it fast as we do nowadays with the streams, but you know how these things go sometimes. All right. So, first things first. Yes, OPR UKG. So, UKGE is running now. It's this weekend or this weekend, whatever. We are going to be at UKG. We have a stand there. So, make sure if you're at UKG to come check it out. Check out what we have on offer, meet the team, yeah, there's also going to be a tournament. I'm not going to be there, unfortunately, but it's so weird. Every year something happens because of which I am unable to get to UKG. Maybe next year. So, finally, I would love to go and meet the UK, fan base. But, it is what it is. Yeah, if you're UKG, make sure to check us out and, maybe go say hi to the people that are playing the tournament and see OPR in action, get a demo, check out the boxes of stuff that we have there, and yeah, another cool convention that we are part of. I think this is now the third year that we are UKG. I think Spiel is the one that we've been going to for the longest. I think we went there four times already. Might be. And I think UKG is right after that, and then Adepticon. Yeah. Anyway, okay, moving on. So, yes, the OPR writing jam is running. So we have, we run writing jams periodically, and we've slowly been changing the cadence of that. Whatever. Now we're doing one a year. We're doing one writing jam a year and one game jam, well, or mission jam a year. And yes, it's the 14th writing jam. So it is running until tomorrow, as far as I know. So if you didn't know about it until now and you want to quickly jump in, make sure to check it out. The writing jam is basically a little community get together where you get to write a one-page short story set in the OPR universes. And then everybody gets to read everyone's story, vote on it, and then the winners or the people that are most voted get a little prize. But there's also a cool participation prize for everyone involved. So if you are if you're part of the jam, you will get the two minis that you're seeing here on screen, which I think are very very cool. And yeah, it's just a fun thing that we do, twice a year, and it's cool to see what people come up with, and um, yeah, it's just nice. It's just nice. Okay, then moving on. Worlds Beyond Brawl. Yes, Worlds Beyond Brawl is running for another week, as far as I remember. I think it's until the 5th. Don't quote me on that. But yes, it's running for about another week. If you haven't, checked it out yet, make sure to check it out now. You get like a gazillion miniatures there. All the miniatures have stats in the game, so you can play them together. And then, of course, you can find them, use them to find new creators that you hadn't checked out yet, and then explore deeper um, into their catalog and see what's up, see what they have, see what they do. There's also some new miniatures that come with the campaign, a bunch of like heroic heroes and other cool miniatures from the various creators. So there's also fresh stuff in there, and yeah, it's cool. It's so cool to see all these creators come together to make this happen, and yeah, it's I'm always here, kind of like dreaming, and for a long, long time, I always had this dream of like, you walk into a game store or like a local game club, and people have different miniatures that you can all just play together, and every day this dream becomes truer. And it's incredible to see how many creators are now part of the program, and even like really big creators that maybe you wouldn't have expected before, and how it makes everything yeah how it just makes everything work, and how it brings the community together. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, you have about a week before it's closed, so it's it's dirt cheap for what you get. So take this opportunity to grab some models before they're back at full price. And yeah. Okay, that was the smaller topics. Oh no, we have one more. No, two more, I guess. So more print-on-demand books are now available on Wargame Vault slash Drive Through RPG. These are actually some of the most requested ones. Like, of course, lots of people asked for the advanced rule books. Those were already added a month ago, 2 months ago. But now finally we have the faction books on there, which I think really is where this thing shines. And you get the cool cover art, and you get all of the cool art inside, and faction book is it's a whole other level of it's a whole other level of book, because it has so much art in there, and the maps, and like the color schemes and all that stuff. And I think it comes out really, really, really cool. So yeah, make sure to check it out if you've been dreaming about getting our faction books as hard physical things. You can now finally do that, and yeah, it's cool. As more and more stuff from OPR comes out in a physical way, it's feeling more and more and more real. I guess. I mean, it's been 12 years, so it's already been very real for a long time. Um, but I guess it does feel a bit different to have a book in your hand. Okay, moving on to Horde mode. Yes, so this month we've released Horde mode, which is something that's been in the work for a while, and we've been excited about the idea of Horde mode for a long time. But finally, I sat down and actually made it happen. This is actually one of those things that we announced. I announced a bunch of things, a bunch of projects during the end of year stream, and this is actually one of them. But yes, Horde mode. So, what is Horde mode about? Basically, you can play either solo or co-op, so you with your friends, um, and you basically set up your army. I mean, it can be played on all the games. That's actually very cool. So you can play it for quest, you can play it for skirmish, you can play for battle size, and then basically you have your hero army in the center, or hero warband, or heroes in the center, and then basically from the edges a bunch of enemies swoop in, and they keep swarming you, and you're trying to essentially like grab objectives, hold them, and with those you can earn points, you can earn XP, so you actually level up as you play. You also earn points, so you can buy upgrades, you can buy new units and stuff like that. And essentially you're just trying to survive as many waves of enemies as possible, and then at the end you also get like a nice little high score to see how far you got, and you can compare high scores, and you can try to beat your own high score and stuff like that. Yeah, honestly it's a pretty simple system. As with many things with OPR, as we've built more and more systems over time, everything just kind of clicks. So Horde mode, in many ways, is a combination of our campaign system and our solo co-op system, and then also part of the stuff that came with quests, and then it's just kind of like all bundled together to become one. And yeah, it's a great solo and co-op experience. And of course, you don't have to play it against AI enemies. You can also have another player just play the sort of you know game master or whatever, horde master, and they play as the horde whilst you are defending, and it's just a lot of fun. We actually ran horde mode at Adepticon, and people really dug it. So we're looking forward to using this again in the future and potentially expanding on the system, and so on and so forth. So yeah, if you have any feedback, please provide us with feedback, because we would love to know what you think and how we can improve it. All right, that was a quick fire of our base topics. So now, yes, let's go to the big topic of the day. So, v3.6 closed beta is coming. Closed beta 1. What is this? Basically, we've been using Army Forge Labs as a way to collect feedback on the development of v3.6 as it went along, and we have now reached a point where v3.6 is very, 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 very feature complete. Um, so basically, we have all the armies are basically ready. We have all the gangs and guilds are also ready. We have all the special rules ready. We have the core rule books ready. We have the advanced rule books ready. We have all this stuff already. And so now we think it's finally time to run a beta. This is going to be a closed beta. So what does that mean? Yeah, let me talk a little bit about the beta experience as a whole and how this changes compared to the beta that we ran last time. And then I'm going to talk a bit about v3.6 and what's going to be in the closed beta. But basically, when we ran the beta in, what was it, September, October of last year, we ran a beta for um, v3.5, and it was uh, very chaotic. Let's be honest. Like it worked like labs works, which is basically like, hey, I'm getting feedback. As I get feedback, I make changes and stuff like that. And this was very, very disruptive for a lot of players. It made it hard for them to participate in the beta, and it just caused a lot of confusion. And so, okay, we decided that that's not gonna be how we do betas in the future. And so, with v3.6, what we're trying to do now is a new type of beta. So, first things first, this is going to be a closed beta. So, what does that mean? It means that to access the beta, you need to be a patron. You need to be able to log into the when you log into the beta site, you'll be asked for your patron credentials, and with that, you'll be able to see all of the armies and all of the lists. On top of that, we're also going to provide on Patreon directly all of the new versions of the core rules and the advanced rulebooks, so that you can already check those out as well. And it's going to also come with a document talking about a bunch of stuff. It's a 11-page document, so you can read all about like what's the idea of the beta and what's happening in there and what's coming with v3.6 and all the ideas and stuff like that. I will touch upon a bunch of this stuff now, just so you know. But yes, so that's the idea of the closed beta. And then the format is basically going to be that the beta is going to run for 3 or 4 weeks. The idea is to start next week. We have to finalize a couple of things in the system, but we're relatively confident that we will have it ready by next week, and then we will be able to launch. And then the beta will run until about the end of June. During the beta, none of the stuff is going to be updated. So that means for those 3 4 weeks, you'll be able to go grab the PDFs, play a bunch of games without having to worry that, oh my god, like every 5 minutes something is changing. So you're gonna have a nice 3 4 week period to play things, and also instead of us collecting feedback live, we will instead send a survey at the end of the beta where you're basically going to be asked a million questions about all the various things that are part of the beta, and then you can provide us with your feedback. So the idea basically is you get to see all this stuff. You have 3 or 4 weeks to check it out, to play with it, to do your thing, and then think about everything. And then at the end, there's a survey. You fill out the survey. Boom, the beta is done. Now, when I say that it's a closed beta, many people ask, like, okay, so I'm a patron, but like my friends aren't. Like, how do I test this thing? So the thing of the closed beta is like you're the only one that has access to the to Army Forge or the beta Army Forge side. But it's totally fine, of course, if you play with your friends. So you can show them the Army Forge site. You can help them build a an army from Army Forge, or if you're sitting next to them, they can build it directly there, or you can build the armies for them. You can, of course, download the PDFs and share them with your friends. Whatever you need to do so that you can play with your friends is totally fine. What we really are asking you not to do is don't download all the PDFs and put them like on a public forum or on a public Discord or share them online or stuff like that. That would be kind of breaching the scope of this this closed beta thing. And yeah, that's about it about the general scope of the beta. The idea, of course, is to run this as a first attempt at a beta. So that's why we're calling it the closed beta 1. And then, depending on how things go, we might run a second beta maybe in July. Who knows? Maybe we'll run a third beta in August. And maybe if we feel confident in the format and in how it's how it's going and stuff like that, we might actually do an open beta in August as well. But I'm not sure, so don't count on that for now. Yeah, I think that's about it about the format. Now, there is something that I want to talk about before we go into the details of what's gonna be in the beta, which is more about like the future of game updates. Because one of the things that we have one of the things that we've noticed is that a lot of players' approach to the games and the updates has kind of changed. Trying to think about. Okay, so when OPR first started, the games were updated basically daily. Then the game started being updated weekly. Then the game started being updated monthly. And then eventually we switched to this sort of like quarterly pace where like every quarter we would update and do like, update the rule books and update the armies and stuff like that. And then eventually we changed it where we said, well, we're going to update the rule books only once a year. And there's going to be 3, quarterly balance patches. And then last year we said, hey, okay, instead of doing it that way, we're going to update the rule books once a year, and we're going to have one big balance patch once a year, and then in every 6 months, and then there's also hot fixes and stuff like that. And no matter what, it feels like the pace has been going a bit too fast for players. And so what we would like to do is tentatively, if things are good and stable, we would like to start a new update cycle with the next edition, which basically would be that, okay, the idea would be that the rule books are hopefully good enough where we can keep them stable for a long period of time. And so basically, the way it would work is we would have small hot fixes every 3 months. So that means if, for example, we notice that, I don't know, there is a special rule that is broken, there is a upgrade package that isn't working, whatever, something tiny like that, that would be a hot fix, and that sort of stuff would come, every quarter. Really, it's such a small thing, it doesn't really matter. Also, every quarter we would do like addition of units. So, sometimes there's like new model kits out there that people would like to see in the games. So every quarter we can add those units. So basically, it's like none of these changes are things that will affect your armies and change how you play and whatever. It's more like, hey, we fixed a bug, and this army now has 2 more units. Great. Then, instead of having a edition change every 12 months and then every 6 months in between having a balance patch, we will change that and instead have one balance patch every 12 months. So in September, instead of an addition change, there would be a balance patch. So the same way we had a balance patch now, a month ago, that's when the balance patch would happen. So there would be one major balance patch a year instead of basically there being two. And as part of that release window of the balance patch, if if necessary, because we spot some grammatical issues, some typos, something like that, we would do a minor rulebook update, but only to fix those sort of things, not to change the rules at all. And then instead, the idea is that the rule books would be stable enough where we would only do an addition change of the rule books every like 3 or 4 years, or 5 years, or longer, depends on how we need it. So basically, the too long didn't read of this is there would be one army balance patch per year, and then there would only be one rulebook change, new edition every 3 to 5 years. So the idea is, okay, things slow down in terms of like the updates to the rulebooks, because honestly, like even now the changes are not that big or whatever. But basically, like things slow down in terms of the rulebook, so you can have your rulebook, and it takes it survives, it lasts for a long time, and then every year we get like a major balance patch, and then every quarter we're looking at like additions, to make armies cooler, to add new stuff and stuff like that. And that's kind of the cadence that we're hoping to be able to hit, which should make things much more, hopefully much more manageable for players and much more relaxed. So it's more like, okay, there is the balance patch in September, and then you have a whole year before your army is going to get, changed if there are any changes coming. But throughout the year, if new units are added, then that's stuff that's on top of it, so you don't have to worry about like losing anything in your army. It's more like there's something new. Of course, whenever we make new miniatures, we will be adding those miniatures to the armies. If for whatever reason we are completely reworking an army to work with the miniatures, although that's kind of rare, that will of course happen as the miniatures come out. That's the usual stuff. But we basically want to avoid having this situation where players feel like they cannot trust the minis that they have on hand and the rules that they have on hand, and they feel like, oh my god, like every 6 months everything is changing, and the changes are huge, and like it's driving me crazy. And so yeah, that's the idea. Of course, in September there will be a balance patch. So that's gonna happen. So I'm sorry if you were hoping to not see a balance patch in a long time. There is a balance patch coming in about, um, you know, 4 months ish, 4 or 5 months ish, yeah. But then after that, the idea is that the next balance patch would happen a year later, and so you can, chill out a bit. And this would also hopefully give us more time to start focusing on other things like, more in-depth reviews of armies, addition of newer and cooler stuff, new game modes and things like those. Working on other games, Warfleets needs some working on. The small scale games would be a cool thing to do. All this sort of stuff. All right. Now let me talk about the actual content of the beta. I will go through a couple of things. A lot of this stuff is stuff that um, I've already discussed previously, in the streams, but whatever. Let's go through it. So, what are the big things that are changing? So, number one, it's we are replacing distance conditions. So, one of the things that came with v3.5 that seemed fine at the time, but turns out players did not enjoy over time and did not really get used to, is the introduction of all of these rules conditions that are like over 9 inches away. So, relentless, it's if you are shooting enemies over 9 inches away, then X, then you get a bonus. Or if whatever the rules are, it's if you're over 9 inches away, XYZ happens. And the problem, of course, is that it means that players feel like they're constantly having to measure really precisely, and it's leading to like a lot of slowing down of the game and making things feel much more complex. So what we're going to do is we're going to go a little bit back into how things were working in v3.4, which is basically that things were based on the actions. So very simple. Offensive rules will now work when you are using a hold or a charge action, whereas defensive rules will now work when the enemy is using a movement action. So what does that mean? In the very simple thing is, um, if you hold or charge, you get your offensive powers, and if the enemy advances or charges, you get your defensive powers. Really simple, really nice. Honestly, a breath of fresh air to kind of play like this, because it's like you don't have to worry about like measuring all the time. It's more like, hey, did your unit hold and now it shoots? Great, it gets a bonus. Did you charge me? Okay, I get my bonus. Did you move and shoot? Okay, I get my defensive bonus. Did you charge? Okay, it's just based on the action. It's like, what did you do? Okay, therefore this happens. It's not anymore of this thing of like, okay, I charged, but my charge was over 9 inches, so I get my bonus. And you check, and you're like, well, but your charge was over 9 inches, so I get my defensive bonus. And now we're constantly, it's much simpler. It's just hold, advance, charge, depending on the thing that you're doing. The rule kicks in. Honestly, this is probably one of the biggest changes that like makes you breathe again in a really cool way and brings OPR back to a much more manageable system. The second thing is, or the next thing that we are going to work on is, or that is part of the beta, is fixing hybrids and the introduction of the assault rule. Basically, what are hybrids? Hybrids are units that have like lots of melee attacks and lots of shooting attacks. And basically, what happens is they're not really efficient in either way. And so, if you have a unit that's focused on just shooty or just melee, then they're just better. And so, these hybrid units kind of end up falling to the wayside because they're just too expensive for what they're doing. And so, how are you fixing this? Basically, there's two ways that we're fixing it. On the one side, we're fixing it by just changing their loadouts. So you're not going to have units anymore where you have a ton of melee attacks and a ton of shooting attacks, and you can't do both at once, and so you're paying all that price. So it's just by changing their loadouts that's changing. And so whilst the other thing is the introduction of the assault rule. What is the assault rule? Super simple. The assault. I'm literally reading the rule. The rule says counts as both a ranged weapon and a melee weapon. This is a weapon rule, of course. Very simple. So if you have a pistol, now the pistol counts as both a ranged and a melee weapon, which means when you shoot it, you shoot it. When you charge into melee or whatever, when you're fighting in melee, you can also use its attacks in melee. Very simple, and this also allows us to create really interesting unit profiles where you get to have weapons that are both shooty and can be both used for shooting and in melee. And it allows us to create lots of different combinations that are very interesting. Some examples, I made a list here of a couple of examples just to explain how it works. Units with special pistols will now be able to use those in melee as well. So until now, for example, you could get yourself a really cool like flamer pistol or a fusion pistol, and that's a really cool pistol. But because you can only use that thing when you're shooting, essentially you never really ended up using your fusion pistol, and it was kind of a waste, and people just were not picking those pistols. Whereas now you can shoot your fusion pistol, well, in melee. You can use it as a melee weapon. And so now you actually get a use out of that. Same thing with your flamer pistol, plasma pistol, shred pistol, and so on and so forth. Next up is stuff like destroyer style units. So stuff that right now has like a big storm rifle and like a energy fist. And right now it's kind of like, it doesn't really work. It's just too expensive. Now you can actually basically specialize. You can be like, okay, I will either specialize for a melee build, and so then you get a version of the storm rifle which has the assault rule, so you can shoot with it and you can use it in melee. And then you have your nice little energy fist. I say a little, but yeah. Or of course, you can go for a more shooty build and you focus on the storm rifle, and you get a more powerful storm rifle that does not have the assault rule, and then you get like a hand weapon. Of course, if you want, you can also then swap the hand weapon for a energy fist. So you can, if you want, you can go and create a more classic hybrid build where you are paying a lot for both and you keep both, but it's not the only way that the unit works. So now it's an opt-in thing. So it's like, if you want to do that, we're not going to stop you from doing it, but we're not going to deprive you of a good profile for the unit. Another thing, for example, would be cavalry or chariot. This is more for fantasy. Cavalry and chariot units that right now have, for example, javelins. But actually, yeah, in we can talk about this with bikes in Grimdark as well. But it's like, okay, right now you have lots of cavalry units that have like javelins, and the problem is, well, you never get to really use your javelin because you're charging with them. Whereas now javelins have assault, so you can shoot with it, you can throw those javelins, or of course, when you charge into melee, you can fight with the javelins. Very cool. Same thing for the bikes. That's actually a really big one for Grimdark Future. Bikes have kind of been in this weird position for a very long time where they're just like not really very efficient because they kind of have these split profiles where they have a bunch of like bike rifles and then they also have like pistols and hand weapons, and it's just like, what is it trying to do? Is it trying to be fast and charge? Is it trying to shoot? And so now you actually get a cool double profile. So like you can basically select what you do, and you can either get a more melee focused version where you basically have the bike with some bike guns that have the assault rule, and then you have your pistol and your hand weapon, which means that when you charge with your bike, you get to use your bike guns in melee and your pistol and hand weapon. Very cool. Or of course, you get to swap for the other option where you basically have the regular bike rifles, which are better at shooting, and then you have your battle rifle and you have your whatever, your strike, and that basically allows you to create a more shooty version. So you see, I hope I'm explaining how the assault rule really helps here, because it allows us to create these things where it's like, well, this miniature has guns, but I can make those guns work in melee, and so now this model actually finally makes sense in the game. Other examples is stuff like monsters with mounted weapons. So I'll give you a good example. I know that like in the the Saurians, for example, have an option where you basically have like the Triceratops, and then on top of the Triceratops, you have a bunch of like little geckos that throw like javelins. And again, there is that problem where right now you can shoot with javelins or you can charge, and so it's like, your Triceratops is not really good in melee. It's not really good at shooting. What is it doing? And instead, now those javelins will have the assault rule, and so that means that now the geckos can throw the javelins, and then you can also charge into melee, and then you can do all that stuff. Another one, but we'll talk about this more about vehicles. We now also have vehicles, so pintle mounted weapons on vehicles. A pintle mounted weapon is basically you have a turret, and then on top of the turret you usually have a guy like firing a machine gun, like he's popping out and like those now will also have the assault rule, which means that okay, you can shoot, but now they can actually be used for close quarter self defense. So one of the things that people have been complaining about with vehicles, we'll talk a bit about it more later, is like they're kind of incapable in melee. And so with this, you can say like, well, uh, I'm gonna decide to make my vehicle have a thing that I can use to shoot at close distance, basically melee, and defend myself a little bit more. Okay, I think that's about it talking about the assault rule and fixing hybrids. I hope you can see how it works. Oh, yeah, one important thing. Right now, in the advanced rulebook, you have something called the assault special action or advanced action. That's just going to be cut from the game. It's not necessary anymore. It would become, it's basically obsolete once assault has been introduced to the game. Other things. So, one of the big things has been generally reworking weapons and giving you more toys. So, what does that mean? Basically, over time, we noticed that like AP has kind of slowly crept up to be on too many weapons, and also lots of weapons kind of stopped really feeling like a trade-off one with the other, and so there were just like some weapons that were just super powerful, and then other weapons that were just kind of crappy. And so basically, we're kind of like rebalancing and reworking a bunch of the weapons to make them feel more even and feel more like a choice, where it's like, okay, it's not just obvious like this is the version that is the strongest. It's more like, okay, this version of the weapon or this weapon is good at this thing, whilst this other weapon is good at this thing, and there isn't just a universal I'm good at everything weapon. Um, and so with this, basically, we've reworked a bunch of stuff. So basically, yes. So weapons in general were retweaked to make them more equal and balanced. And this is especially for units that had too few attacks. So there were lots of units in the game, especially tough 3 and tough 6 units in the game that had way too few attacks, and so they were kind of like underwhelming, and so that has all been reworked so that they feel properly good. Then we have also tweaked all the weapons, like I was saying, to have like interesting trade-offs between each other. And also, we're now using special rules to add more variety in the loadout. So, for example, the Surge rule and the Shred rule, which have become quite popular, have now been added to the core rules, and so they're going to be used more frequently on like more regular weapons. So you get used to that. What else? Yeah, new weapon options were added across the board. This is so right now there's lots of units in the game that have no weapon options at all, or maybe just like one little option. And so I went through. This whole patch has been a huge amount of work, but basically we went through every unit, every profile, every upgrade list, and we've added a ton of options. This is especially true for fantasy, where right now most armies have barely any upgrades. So you're going to see lots of really cool upgrades all across the thing. Using also these new weapon special rules and stuff like that. Yes, army weapon special rules have been reworked. So as we discussed with v3.5.3, we basically decided to cut a bunch of them and just replace them temporarily with a couple of existing weapon rules. Now we are going to not bring back, but we're going to add a couple of new weapon special rules that do some cool stuff or some interesting stuff in the game. And basically, they're going to make your armies a little bit more varied again. So right now, for example, like Lacerate is all over the place, but that was a temporary fix, and this is going to be changed. So just to give you an idea, if before there were, I think, around 30 plus v3.5 had around 30 plus weapon special rules. With v3.5.3 we cut it down to about 10, and with v3.6 we're going back up to about 15. So there's a couple more rules, which allows us to have a little bit more variety, but it's nowhere near the massive amount of extra special weapon rules that we had before. And also they're now more differentiated, so they're not just like, before we had like one which was like, oh, on 6 you get AP1, then there was another one that was on 6 you get AP2, then there was one that was on 6 you get AP3, and then there was one that was on 6 you get AP4. We're not doing that anymore. Instead, we're coming up with actual interesting new ways to make weapon special rules, and we think they are very cool. What else? Yes, upgrade paths are being made much clearer. So like I was explaining before with the assault rule, right now units are usually kind of like dedicated. We're trying to make sure that people understand when units are kind of dedicated to one thing versus the other thing. And so the way that upgrade lists have been rearranged essentially makes it easier to understand. So it will be like, you have your base loadout, and then you'll be able to swap. It'll be very clear how to swap to a loadout that is maybe okay. Everybody now has a shield and a hand weapon. So maybe imagine like the unit starts with pistol and hand weapons, and then what you'll be able to do is replace all pistols and hand weapons, and then you'll have like hand weapon and shield, and then you'll have say battle rifle and strike. And so okay, you kind of know, okay, so my base loadout is kind of the pistol hand weapon version. If I want to go shielded, I go this loadout. If I want to go ranged, I go this loadout. And then from there, you can then further upgrade. So, for example, replace the battle rifles and stuff like that. And then you can further specialize. But basically, it just makes it much easier to read. And I think that's a really cool side benefit of all of these additions. Other things. Yes, one thing. So in fantasy, we've had for a long time, there was kind of this complaint that hand weapons feel kind of useless. They're kind of just there. They don't really do anything. And so it's like, well, just grab halberds and stuff like that. So now hand weapons actually have a rule called the parry rule. And parry, basically, it's very simple. It's essentially when you take hits in melee, you roll a die on a 6-up, you ignore that hit. It's kind of like regen, but for hits instead of for wounds. And it also only works in melee. But basically, it gives you a reason to take hand weapons, and also it helps us differentiate between melee units and say archers. Because before you had archers, each archer had a hand weapon with A1, and then you had your Ratman infantry, and each Ratman infantryman had a hand weapon with A1, and so it was like, well, when they're in melee, the archers are just as good as the militia, and so instead with this system, the archers, instead of having a hand weapon, they will just have something called strike, and strike is just A1, whereas the militia or whatever would have a hand weapon with parry, and so it's actually a little bit better in melee. So helping differentiate things and stuff like that. And then finally, whilst this is not directly a weapon change, one thing that we're playing with right now is the idea of reworking Furious and Relentless, so that instead of giving an additional hit on a roll of 6, they give AP plus 1 instead. When you have their condition, for example, for Furious, when you charge, you get AP plus 1. Essentially, we're trying to see. We want to see how players react, but of course, the idea here is to essentially reduce the amount of rules that happen on like a 6 and that add new hits and stuff like that. And since Furious and Relentless are rules that are very common across all armies, changing those would have like a very big effect across um, across the entire game, and would help reduce the amount of oh, I'm always looking for sixes vibe that there is right now sometimes. Okay, moving on to other things. Hero improvements. Okay, so lots of things. I'm gonna try and talk about a couple of the main ones. So first off, all heroes have more weapons and customization than before. So this is again especially for fantasy. So now heroes have lots of different like assault weapon options. They have lots of different ranged weapon options. They have lots of different melee weapon options. They of course have also other options like getting mounts and stuff like that. And the idea basically is like, look, heroes should be cool. We think that it should be the type of thing that should be very, very customizable. It's kind of like where people really get to express themselves. And so, we did this. We added all these options, and also we added these options in um, fantasy, which is where right now actually you're lacking a lot of weapon options. So there you'll feel it a lot. This of course has a trickle down effect, which is very cool, which is that it now means that for skirmish and for quest you now have even more weapon options. So for example, if you're playing a campaign, it means that there's more stuff that you can buy with the gold and points that you earn, and you can do a bit more customization than before. So yeah, lots of customization there. And then like I was saying before about upgrade paths, it's also now easier to understand how how you upgrade and how you go from where. So for instance, you will have a a hero that starts with a pistol and a hand weapon, and then you can be like, okay, well, I'll go with a caster staff. We'll talk about casting staffs in a second. And then maybe I'll go for dual hand weapons, and then maybe I'll go for I don't know, dual pistols. I don't know. And then you'll be like, okay, well, now you've kind of chosen your direction, or I'll go for a battle rifle and a strike. And now you've chosen your direction. And afterwards, you'll be able to be like, okay, well, replace your pistol. And so, okay, if you went for a pistol and hand weapon, then now you can upgrade here. But if you chose the battle rifle, then you'll be able to like, scroll down and go to where it says like replace battle rifle and replace that. Because right now what happens in v3.5 and since before is that everything is kind of lumped into like one huge list, and whilst on one side it makes it, I guess, more logical, I'm not sure. It's just a different paradigm. It's just like one has everything rolled into one, and I guess in a way it's a bit easier to read because you don't have to scroll up and down. But on the other hand, it just gets really confusing because it's like, what's all of this stuff? And so with this, you kind of understand um, where to go. The second thing about heroes is that again, right now, heroes like many other units are kind of underpowered. So like you'll have lots of heroes that just have like a hand weapon with A2, and it's like that's not really strong for a hero, especially when you can get like a basic guy with A2. And so now basically all the heroes' weapons and profiles are made in such a way that they always kind of hit their Balba limit, and so that way heroes are a little bit stronger. They're not super much stronger, in a lot of cases that means that they just get like one or two extra attacks, but it's a little something something. And actually the bigger thing is that for mounts right now there's lots of mounts that add tough, but they don't really add enough attacks to kind of like make sense. And so you end up with a hero that has a mount and has a huge toughness value, but then actually doesn't have enough attacks to kind of like compensate. And so it kind of feels like a shitty profile. And so those mounts will now always come with an appropriate amount of attacks. So, for example, if right now you have some sort of, big, you can ride a big bull that gives you tough 3 and impact 1. Well, in v3.6, it will give you tough 3 and impact 3. So it kind of like fits the actual um, power. And then the final thing is, so we are now changing it so that friendly units within 6 inches of heroes can now take a morale test using the hero's quality. And pretty much, well, as long as the hero isn't shaken and isn't part of another unit, which basically means that solo heroes now are a little bit more viable. So, if you have, we got a lot of stuff like, oh, you have the Hive Lord from the Alien Hives, and you have the battle tank commander from the um, Human Defense Force, and people are kind of like, what's the point that they're heroes? Like, they don't really affect anything. And so we said, you know what? That's right. Let's do something cool here. So now, if a friendly unit is within 6 inches of your big alien hives, um, uh, 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 sorry, I'm blanking because I'm thinking about so many things at the same time. The alien hives hive lord, then they can take a morale test using his quality or its quality, I suppose. Although actually, by the lore, all the alien hives are kind of like male except for the child, which is female. Whatever. But yes, the Hive Lord then can basically boost the morale of nearby units. Very simple. It's kind of like, honestly, already what we had in Skirmish, and it's essentially just extended to the main games and just a little extra bonus for heroes to have. Then, okay, moving on. We still have a couple of things to go through. So, all right, I'm going to try and be fast. So, tweaking spells and casters. So, casters were overhauled with v3.5. They had to be made a little weaker. I'm sorry. It just, they were a bit too strong. But we think that there's a couple of things that we can do to make casters feel a little bit better for players. And so let's talk about them. So, number one, heroes can now be upgraded with something called a caster staff. And a caster staff basically gives you +1 to casting rolls once per round. So, one of your spells each round, instead of going off on a 4+, just goes off on a 3+. So this hopefully helps make spells a little bit more reliable. And then if you have an extra spell point to spend, boom, it goes on a 2-up. Now it's really reliable. Of course, it only happens once per round, so you cannot spam 20 spells and all of them get +1. And also, the caster staff replaces the other weapons. So actually, this has a really cool side effect where you now get a better or a cooler differentiation between the types of heroes that you have, because you can have a dedicated caster which has the casting rule and then has a caster staff and is better at casting, but is not that good at shooting or melee or whatever. Or you could have another hero that is also a caster, but that decides to go a little bit more fighty, has a pistol in hand weapon or a rifle or whatever, but doesn't get the caster staff, so doesn't get that bonus to the casting roll. And so you get a nice little thing there, which we think is really nice and handy. Then the second thing is line of sight requirements are now not part of the caster rule anymore, but instead are rolled into the actual spells. What does this mean? This means that you can now have spells that some spells don't require line of sight at all, especially really short range spells, because we found that it was really hard for players. For example, you have those spells which are like, well, you need to target 2 enemy units within 9 inches, and then they also require line of sight, and it was like, oh, it's just never happening. And so, for example, those spells now don't require line of sight anymore, and so it makes it easier for you to be able to cast them. I think also like buff spells, like friendly buff spells don't require line of sight, whereas anything that is like 12 inches or above, and enemy like marks, debuffs, and all that stuff, they require line of sight. So there's a bit of a variation there, a bit of a change, and again, it should hopefully make some parts of spell casting smoother, better, more interesting to play with. Also, two more things. This also means that you don't require line of sight to give spellcasters +1, -1 to casting rolls, which also should make the interaction between different casters a little bit easier, a little bit more, a little bit more relaxed. And finally, level 3 spells all now always have +6 inch range, because it's just you're already spending so much to try and make this spell go off, and right now some of them are really tough to feel valuable, and so giving them a little bit extra range hopefully works better, especially because usually level 3 spells are the ones that target multiple units. So before maybe it was like, well, now you have to target 3 enemy units within 12 inches, and it's like, it's tough that you have them. But now it's going to be, well, it's 3 enemy units within 18 inches, and now it's like, okay, it's more likely that you'll be able to find at least a couple of targets with that. Finally, the last thing, which is so simple yet has a huge effect, is we basically have tweaked the order of spells in the spells list as per community feedback. So we've been talking a bunch to the community, of course, with labs, and we've been asking a bunch of questions about casting and spell levels and stuff like that. And we have essentially like reworked them. In general, what this means is that more specialized spells are now easier to cast. So because they are less likely to come up, or it might be harder for you to find an optimal target for them, they're a little bit easier to cast. Whereas spells that are more general, that are more easy to use, that are more, that can help you in more situations, are higher level, which also means they affect more units, which also means it's more likely to find more units where affecting them makes sense. So to give you an example, let's say you have a spell that gives you protected. Protected is basically regeneration on 6 up. Well, this maybe would be, for example, a level 3 spell, which means, okay, so you can find 3 friendly units, give them protected, and it feels like I'll always find 3 friendly units nearby, especially at the beginning of the game, where it makes sense to give them something. Protected will always be useful. Great, I will give it to them. Whereas, for example, if a spell would give spell resistance, which is, you basically get a 2-up save against spells, that's a very specialized thing. And so that would be a level 1 spell. So then it's like, okay, it's less likely that you're going to have the perfect situation for this spell. But when it happens, it's really easy to cast. It's not costing a lot of points. It's not taking up one of the juicy spots for spells. And it's overall more useful. And spell resistance actually also gives you a 6-up save, so it can be used in more cases. Anyway, that's about spells and spell lists. I hope you enjoy that change. Moving on. My God, we still have 3 things to talk about, 4 things to talk about. Okay. I'm trying to be fast. Reworked vehicles. So lots of small things were changed about vehicles, which hopefully will make them more enjoyable. Number 1, right now, sponsons usually have the same number of attacks of like a battle cannon on vehicles, which makes for really weird profiles where, like, you have your big juicy tank and half of its attacks are just like a machine gun or like a flamer, whereas you want the rail cannon to have lots of attacks. So this has basically slightly been rebalanced, where sponsors have fewer attacks and the main battle cannons have more attacks, making your tanks feel more like tanks. Then instead of having impact, um, which is basically like, when you charge a unit, then you get hits, whatever. Vehicles now have a melee weapon called Overrun. Overrun basically is a melee weapon with the thrust rule. So on a standard battle tank that is like tough 12, it would be Overrun, and it would be like A4 with thrust, which basically means that when you're charging with the tank, you have thrust, so you have +1 to hit and AP +1, which gives you a like nice little bonus. So if you have a small enemy unit in front of you that you really need to run over, then you can use that. But it also means that if enemy units attack you in melee, you do have a couple of attacks to strike back. It's not enough to like win a big battle, but if one goblin is striking you, before a random goblin could get a wound on you, sorry, could get a wound on you, win the melee, and now your tank has to take a morale test, and it felt like Whereas now your tank will have a couple of attacks to strike back and hopefully be able to mitigate that combat loss. Also, it kind of makes it so that you want to have slightly more dedicated anti-tank melee units attacking tanks, rather than just, my archers are actually more efficient at charging a tank than shooting, for example. So that's one part. The other part is, like I was mentioning before, pintle style weapons now have the assault rule. So that's another way for you to specialize a vehicle to be basically it can still shoot, of course. Like a pintle-mounted machine gun can still shoot, but it can also be used in melee. So if you're saying, look, I'm really worried about enemy units coming in and charging me and me losing a melee and so on and so forth, then you'll be like, look, I'll get a pintle-mounted machine gun. It can still be fired, against targets that are at the distance. But if I get charged in melee, I can point it down and it's like 3 extra attacks with AP1. It's not huge. Again, you're not gonna make a melee monster out of a tank, but it's enough to make you a little bit more, resilient in melee. And so hopefully this should. So the big issues that we're tackling so far that I've spoken about. Number one, tanks not feeling like tanks because they don't have enough battle tank attacks. So sponsons go down, battle tank. Battle cannon goes up. Cool, feels more like a tank. Then changing impact to overrun and giving pintle weapons assault removes the issue that people have been having with tanks just being way, way, way too vulnerable in melee, and still has that nice feel of like, you can overrun some enemies with your thrust rule. And then we go to the final two things. So number one, transport access has been tweaked across the board. It's not huge, but basically it's just, regular transports still have transport 11 as always, whilst tanks, basically like the amount of transport that attack vehicles and tanks have kind of depends on their toughness. But, it means, transport attack vehicles can now optionally take, transport 6. Bigger tanks might be able to get transport 11. Really, really huge tanks can get transport 21. It's really just a small tweak. And some vehicles, actually, depending on the vehicle, actually have to sacrifice attacks to get transport. So the idea is like, look, if your tank is a little bit more transport focused, then maybe it cannot have the pintle mounted machine gun, and instead has to have transport. You basically sacrifice one thing to get the other, and it feels a little bit more balanced. The other thing, which is a big one, is transport. Well, it's aircraft, and then also transport on aircraft, and basically, so aircraft. We're still tweaking aircraft. It's always been a bit in a weird position. We think we found a good solution to a lot of our problems, which is basically the following. So aircraft weapons now essentially have half the range as before, which means that on the one side, they have to get closer to the enemy and stay closer to the enemy, in order to attack them. Because one of the problems we found with aircraft is, you had a bunch of aircraft and they would fly to one side of the board, then they would have a 36-inch range weapon and shoot halfway across the board, and you basically had no chance of striking back. But now that weapon would have half range, it would be 18 inches, still plenty, but it means you would be you need to be 18 inches closer to your enemy, which gives them more of a chance to maybe move and shoot, or maybe there is somebody else with an anti-tank weapon nearby, with an anti-aircraft weapon nearby, or something like this. So that's one part. The other part is the way that it works right now is that aircraft can have up to twice the amount of attacks as their toughness. So a basic aircraft has tough 6, which means it can have 12 attacks, and we're lowering that from double attacks to 1.5 attacks. So an aircraft with a 6 instead, and a tough 6 aircraft with a 12 instead would be a tough 6 aircraft with a 9. So a couple fewer attacks to make it a little more balanced. Of course, this also means that aircraft will be a little bit cheaper than before. So hopefully that kind of like weighs well, whatever. It feels balanced. And then finally, transport aircraft has two changes. Number one, aircraft cannot have more than transport 6. So we avoid like bigger units being deployed via aircraft. And the other part is that transport aircraft has to essentially sacrifice a third of its attacks to get transport. So you kind of have to specialize. So you're like, okay, well, if my aircraft is going to be a transport, number one, it's going to have fewer attacks. Of course, it has the bonus of being able to transport units really, really far. But number two, it also means that it also cannot carry huge units anymore. So now I have to be a bit more careful and have a bit more, put a bit more thought into what I'm putting into my aircraft and make sure that it's really worth it. All right, so that's the reworking of the vehicles. Then, next up, point cost tweaks. Okay, point cost tweaks. Lots of small tweaks, but the big ones are basically morale values were tweaked to basically scale more appropriately with the basically, morale and defense are quality is used to make rolls that apply damage, whereas morale and defense are rolls that are used to essentially avoid damage. Eh? And essentially, those are things that are kind of like almost like more HP. So if you've ever heard somebody say like, "Oh, regeneration is basically the same as having 50% more HP," that's kind of what I'm talking about here. And essentially, we are tweaking morale to make sure that the cost reflects what it does, which is preventing your units, for example, from routing. So you will see the cost of morale related stuff go up a little bit. The other thing is that the same thing is happening with defense. So the defense values are tweaked, so they scale more appropriately. And it also means that in a new landscape where weapons have been rebalanced and there's, for example, less AP across the board, AP higher defense costs more. So it's because it's now harder to get something that is good against Def 2 stuff. Um, Whatever. The defense costs more because there's also less AP across the board, which of course also means that defense 2 up goes up, so vehicles will be a bit more expensive, and stuff like regeneration, which is also tied to defense, becomes more expensive and stuff like that. And then finally, again tied to vehicles and other things like that, the toughness scaling has been tweaked again, and the way that the curve basically has been changed again, and so it will now better reflect the lack of loss of attacks as you take wounds, the more things you have. So, basically the cost of stuff will go up, especially things like 18 plus, tough 18 plus. You will see their cost go up. And of course, this then compounds with the cost of defense values and the cost of morale values going up. So essentially, you can see a bunch of costs going up. Certain costs are going down. But generally speaking, when it comes to like big vehicles and big monsters and stuff like that, the cost goes up. This means that, of course, some titans and stuff like that, if you're using force organization rules, will not be playable, for example, at 2K anymore. So, you might have to play 2.5K, 3K, and so on and so forth. Please don't forget the suggested standard game size of 2K is just a suggestion. If you want to play 3K, please go ahead and play 3K, 4K, 5K. I've seen people play 20K. Incredible. Some people might even play 40K. And yeah, it's just those values are just a suggestion, so you can do you can do your thing and choose whatever game scale you want. All right, moving on to a very big one. Big, but also small. It's weird. Okay, firefight and skirmish triplification. All right, so um, the background to this is that over the last 5 to 6 years, I'm gonna say, the skirmish landscape has kind of changed, and things that used to be very common and very accepted and have kind of gone the way of the dodo. So, for example, the way that currently skirmish and firefight work is that when you take wounds, you roll on a table to see if you're shaken or if you are um, if you're knocked out. And actually, before there used to be even more results on this table. And back in the day, this was normal for skirmish games. This is kind of what you expected. So if you've played any of the classic games, like your Necromundas and your Mordheims and things like those used to be very common game mechanics back in the day. But over the last 5 or 6 years, there has been a shift, and with this shift, we also find that more and more players find those table rolls and those wound rules to be very confusing, very weird. And so essentially, we are changing that. So introducing triplification. Triplification is honestly very simple. Starting with v3.6, essentially what happens is when you're playing skirmish or firefight, everything is triplified. So if a unit had a weapon with A1, it will now have A3. If a unit had no toughness value, it will have tough 3. If a unit had a weapon with A3, it now has A9. If a unit had tough 3, it becomes tough 9, and so on and so forth. What does this mean? Everything is triplified, which means you roll more dice. There is no more rolling on the wound table. That is gone. Instead, you roll more dice, you deal more wounds. Wounds are accumulated because everybody has tough, And once a model has taken as many wounds as its stuff value, they're dead. Very simple. Uh, Honestly, since v3.6 has been in labs, I've only been playing skirmish this way because it's really really cool. It feels much nicer. You're rolling more dice, which also solves the problem that we've been having with skirmish, where it feels very swingy. Because everything kind of like depends on lots of like rolls of a single die. Instead, now many times you're rolling 3 dice, 4 dice. Sometimes you're rolling 6 dice. Sometimes you're rolling 12 dice with like heroes and stuff like that. So you're rolling tons of dice, you're getting more results, you're getting more stuff, and honestly, it's just more fun, but also it's more balanced because it's less swingy. Additionally, this also, of course, multiplies the cost of everything basically by 3, which solves another problem that we had with skirmish, which is that you might have seen threads about this every now and then in the balance feedback thread in the game feedback channel, which is basically people saying like, "Hey, like I found 2 units that are essentially the same, but their cost that are kind of different, but their cost is the same, and one is just straight up better than the other." And why is that? And that is, of course, because of rounding. So what happens is, when everything costs 5 points, then the moment something is slightly rounded, it rounds up or down to 5 points, and so you end up having like 5 different weapon options where 3 of them are clearly better, or whatever, one of them or 2 of them, who cares? They're just better than the others, but their point cost is the same because when you're dealing with so few points, it rounds very easily, and so with triplification, everything costs more, and so with that, the amount of times that you have these sort of like rounding errors like goes way down. It it triplifies down, I suppose. I'm not sure. It just means you're playing more points. So, but it's the same thing. Like the amount of models you have, it's the same. But for example, a standard game of skirmish would be around 750 points, and a standard game of firefight would be around 1,000 points. I say 1,000 points, you're imagining a full army. No, it's 1,000 points of triplified models. So it's still, whatever, 5, 6, 7, 8 models on the table. So don't worry, it's not that now you're playing massive armies because it's 1,000 points. Instead, it's just that the point system is slightly different. Um, with the removal of the wound check roll, we also have 2 other cool side effects that happen, which is morale rules have been changed. So people have not really been enjoying the morale system in firefight and skirmish for a long time. And finally, that thing is gone. Well, why did people not like it? I think there's basically 2 main things. Well, 3 main things, I suppose. So number one is a lot of people just forgot about it because it only happens once half an army dies, and so you kind of just forget to use it. Another thing is people felt like morale kind of doesn't happen often enough to justify, for example, having fearless on your battle brothers. So I kind of felt like a waste of points. And 3, once again, it's like you're kind of just rolling like a die, and it's very swingy. And so instead, with triplification, now morale just works like in the other games. So when a model loses half or more of its, or when a model takes as many wounds that put it at half or less of its total wound size, whatever, you know the rule. Yeah, that's basically in the game as well. So now instead of waiting for morale to happen when half of your army dies, morale will happen as units take wounds, as they're shut up and stuff like that. And in melee, you now also compare wounds, just like in the other games. So you now have a melee winner, you have a melee loser, and all the regular stuff. You have units that can rout in melee, you have units that get shaken, all the usual stuff that you expect from the other games. And that's about it. There's a couple of other small things, like we have modified how the special movements work, so like jumping and falling and stuff like that, and pushing have been slightly tweaked to make more sense with the new triplificated system. And we've also tweaked how blast works. Right now, blast has a 3-inch range, which basically means a lot of times blast weapons kind of don't really do much, don't really blast enough, and so that has been increased. So now it's a 6-inch range. So now, for example, if a couple of enemies on a command point, on a objective marker, you're more likely to be able to like throw a grenade in there and then actually hitting a couple of models. Yeah, it's weird. It's both a lot and a little. I don't know how to explain it. It's like once you start playing, it's like, oh, Like when you think about all the changes and you make a list, it's like, oh, this change and this change and this change. Like it's a lot of stuff. But when you actually put it on the table and you start playing, it's like, oh, it just feels natural. Um, and yeah, like I said, I have not gone back to play regular skirmish since v3.6 has been in labs, and I heard other players are doing the same. So it's lovely, it's great. All right, getting to the last thing. So um, advanced rulebooks. So this is actually the first time that we are showing advanced rulebooks as part of a beta. So this is going to be exciting because there is a bunch of new stuff as part of the advanced rulebooks. So let's talk about it. I'm going to try and be fast. Oh my god, this has taken so long, but it is what it is. So first things first, progressive scoring has been a big topic this year. Lots of players have been talking about it. I guess especially because it's been a topic because of tournament packs and stuff like that. And essentially, what many people have identified is that right now, progressive scoring, it basically is like, look, if you can get in and grab a couple objectives on the first round, the chances that you're winning are like really, really, really high. And so we are tweaking progressive scoring, and it's a very simple tweak. Basically, instead of objectives earning 1 VP per round, objectives earn as many VP per round as the current round number. So on round 1, they earn 1 VP, on round 2, 2, on round 3, 3, and on round 4, 4. What does this mean? This means that if you grab objectives early, you will accrue a couple of points, which will make a difference, but it will not be such a huge difference that it will just win you the game. And of course, objectives held at the end of the game are worth the most points, so you want to make sure to hold some objectives at the end. And then when you sum the total, you will get a nice number that is much more balanced. And yeah, we think this is a pretty cool system, and we're going to slowly spread it and put it everywhere, wherever we have progressive scoring to keep things more balanced. Then, in the advanced casting section, or the advanced, yeah, I think it's called the advanced casting section, we are adding an option for 2d6 casting. This is something that people have been asking us for a long time, and we have found a way. It is to be tested, but basically, yes, we have found a way to give you the option to use 2d6 casting. It means it has like the possibility of a miscast and stuff like that, but balance wise, it should work. And yeah, we can't wait to see people testing it out and seeing how they do. Then we have added 5 new ways to play the game, which are really cool, in my opinion. They're very cool. So, number one, we have added escalating battles to the Fog of War rules. What are escalating battles? Essentially, before the game, you divide your army. There's different ways to play it. I'm gonna go slowly one by one. So the most basic way to play it is before the game begins, you divide your army in 4 detachments, as equal as possible in points, and then at the beginning of every round, you deploy one of them. So the battle escalates as you play. More and more units are on the table, and usually an escalating battle game lasts 6 rounds instead of 4 rounds. So there is like as the armies start amassing, and then at the end, everybody's on the table and you get to keep playing, and so on and so forth. So, this is the most basic version of escalating battles. More and more stuff comes on the table. Then you can, of course, because it's Fog of War, and part of Fog of War is that it's like, weird. The other way that you can play is that you do the same thing, but you don't choose which detachment to deploy. It's randomized. So you don't know what's going to come up, and based on what comes up, you have to adapt, and so on and so forth. Fog of War, really nice. But then there is the last way to play escalating battles, which I think honestly is the coolest way, which is you essentially you instead of building a regular army, you build an army that's 50% bigger than usual, and then you divide it into 6 detachments, and then throughout the game you get to deploy up to 4 of them. So the idea basically is same thing as before, escalating battle, right? Like more and more units on the table, but because you get to pick which ones you put, you get to react to the enemy. So it's like, okay, well, in the first round you put a bunch of tanks, so now in the second round I'm going to pick this detachment that has a bunch of like fusion rifles, and then you're responding by putting a detachment that has a bunch of aircraft, and then I'm responding by putting a detachment that has a bunch of anti-aircraft. And so it's a nice little it's almost like playing with sideboards if you've ever played that in the tournament rules, but it's dynamic as the game goes on, and I think it's really, really cool, and I can't wait to see players play it. Then we have another new system, which is called political intrigue. Ooh, political intrigue. It's a cool new layer to the game. So basically, the way it works is you have 5. I think they're called directives. I think they're called directives. I don't know if I have it here. Yeah, directives. You have 5 directives that you can basically choose. Wait, let me start from scratch. So there are 5 directives. When it's your turn to activate a unit, instead of activating a unit, you are allowed to pick a directive. So up to twice per round, you can pick a directive that has not been picked yet. And there are 5 different directives. These directives basically give bonuses. Like they might force an enemy to take a morale test. They might um, remove the capturing of an objective. They might allow a unit to immediately move. They might allow a unit to shoot. And I think the last one allows a unit to heal. And so basically, you're kind of weighing the strategy with your opponent where it's like, okay, so I could activate a unit now, but actually, maybe instead of activating a unit, I will use a directive that, I don't know, makes a unit move. And then your opponent is like, okay, well, should I activate a unit? Or I really want to use the directive that heals a unit because this unit has been damaged, but I'm afraid that you're gonna pick it. And so, okay, should I activate a unit? Should I do a directive instead? And so on and so forth. And so there's a lot of like nice little interplay, especially because each directive can only be picked once per round by one of the players, so you cannot overlap, and you're kind of like fighting for them. But then, of course, at the same time, it's either that or activating a unit, and so then you're kind of like choosing like, ooh, like is it more valuable right now to delay? Is it more valuable to attack? What is the deal here? Um, but then on top of it, so that's the basic version to play with political intrigue. But on top of that, there is the even cooler part for me, which is politicians. So I think there are 10 different politicians that you can pick from. And depending on which politician you choose, they then actually have a spin on the directive. So you might have a politician that when you pick the directive where an objective marker flips sides, also all enemy units within 3 inches take damage. And so you're like, ooh, okay, I might take this guy. And so then you, as the opponent, kind of know, okay, well, he has these 2 politicians which are focused on these. So now I kind of know maybe what strategy he wants to use. And then maybe I pick these other guys, but then, okay, who's doing what? And so lots of interesting play there. But of course, on top of that, if you want to make it even more mad, you can also, of course, pick to either have the politicians be open. So you start the game and you say, I picked these 2, you said you picked those 2, and then we just play. Or you can play with them hidden. So you choose your 2 politicians, you keep them hidden, and only the first time that you use a politician, sorry, only when you pick a directive, you may choose to reveal a politician, and then it does a thing. Very cool, lots of stuff. I think it's just fun mind games and a cool way to play the game. Then another thing that we're adding is meat grinder battles. Ooh, so these come in 2 types. I'm making 4. They come in 2 types, which are very cool. Basically, sometimes you want to spend a whole afternoon playing a long, really bloody game. And 4 rounds is fun. You can just extend the game and play bigger points. Sure. But does that really feel like a meat grinder? Not really. So, meat grinder battles. So, meat grinder battles are played over 8 rounds. Um, and they come in 2 varieties. So number one is meat grinder battles with respawning units. This one is pretty easy. Essentially, as you play the game, you battle it out, and when a unit is, I think when a unit is either fully destroyed or shaken, you can basically choose to, well, or when a unit is shaken, you may choose to destroy it, or when a unit is destroyed, well, it's destroyed, and then those units kind of go in a respawn pool, and essentially, at the beginning of each round, you may roll a die, and then there is a chance that you can place them again. The more expensive the unit is, the harder it is that it comes back. But every time that you roll for it and you fail, it becomes easier. So, maybe you have a big Titan, it somehow gets blasted to shreds on round 2. Oh no, you want to bring it back on round 3. Well, maybe you don't manage to get it back in round 3. Round 4, it gets a little easier. Maybe you can't. Round 5, oh, round 5, you manage. Boom, it's back, and now you're fighting. Lots of bloody battles. You're both fighting for objectives, and of course, you're fighting for how many points of the enemies you manage to kill. So, big meat grinder. You're trying to kill. You're encouraged to kill because, of course, that means that then people can bring their stuff back, and that's kind of like the whole point of the meat grinder battle. Really fun. A bit of a slog if you're looking for a fast game. This is not a fast game. This is a meat grinder. But yes, it's a thing. The other type of meat grinder battles, which I think a lot of people will find interesting, is meat grinder battles with unit recruitment. So how does this work? This is really inspired by like RTS games, and essentially the way that it works is that you have your army. No, you don't have your army. You have your point allotment, whatever. So imagine like you say, okay, we're gonna play a 2,000 point game, quote unquote 2,000 point game, and then what happens is you from those 2,000 points at the beginning of the game you get half of them, so 1,000 points to build your initial army, and then you deploy that army, and then as you play the game every round you get additional points, and as you capture objectives you also get additional points, and with those points you can recruit new units as the game goes on. So over time it's kind of an escalating battle, because over time you get more points, so you get to buy new units, but of course units also get destroyed, so you're kind of like replenishing them and stuff like that. Um, and then, of course, as you capture objectives, you also get more points. And so the idea here is that it really feels like this sort of, RTS style, recruitment of units. I'm going to say the following. This is really great if you have a huge collection of miniatures, or if you're very happy to like proxy things and say, look, I want to, have 10 more goblins, but I only have 10 cat miniatures. Let's just say that these work. I think it's great for like digital, like virtual tabletop, because there you don't really have limits of how many miniatures you have, and so it's easier to, play this sort of game. But find your way. I would highly recommend proxying if you don't have tons of miniatures. But if you have big collections, this gets easier and easier to play. And then, of course, on virtual tabletop, you can virtually do anything. All right, and then finally, the last thing that we are changing in the rules. This is really simple, honestly. Is basically small. So we have a section for playing with small scale miniatures and multi basing. And the way that it works right now is essentially to play with small scale miniatures, you have to use multi basing. Multi basing basically means that you say, well, I have a stand, a base, a stand of miniatures, and this miniature represents this unit, and this unit is made of 10 models. So I'm basically going to say, well, this is a unit of 10 models. It has tough 10, essentially. It has 10 attacks. And then as I play the game, I'm basically pretending that this base is this amount of models, and then I roll all those dice and so on and so forth. And what happens is you have a unit of 10, and that becomes one base, and then you have a tank, and that becomes one tank. And then you basically get to play, you can play a regularly sized game on, for example, a really small surface with small scale miniatures, or of course, you could play a huge game with like thousands of points. But of course, the more points you play, the more complex it gets. Hmm. What we're adding is a new way to play. Really, it's just an idea of how to play. It's not, I cannot really say it's a rule, but whatever. It's a suggestion of another way to play, which is basically to play with the regular rules, but simply instead of having a base represent 10 models, you still have 10 models, and each model is represented by a base. So a base in small scale is like a little stand or like a little base with usually like 5 to 10 models on it. So basically, if you had a unit of, say, 10 Battle Brothers, well, in regular small scales as we had it until now, you would have to multi-base, so you would have just one stand, and so you would basically like compress the game. Whereas here you would have 10 stands, so now you're fighting it from the optical view. When you look at it on the battlefield, it's a huge battle, right? Like your 10 battle brothers suddenly became a unit of 100 battle brothers, and so you get to play massive battles. When it comes to vehicles, also very simple. You basically use one vehicle per tough three. So instead of having one tank be represented by one little tank, it's represented by a little company of 4 tanks. And so this way, you then use just the basic regular rules. You don't have to do anything special, right? Because each base represents one model. So when you have 10 Battle Brothers, they roll 10 dice. And then when one of them dies, you remove an entire stand. And really, it's just a simple way to have really epic looking battles without making the game any more complex, without having to play a 10,000 point game, just for it to look absolutely epic. Woo! Okay, so this is it for everything that's going to be in the beta. I thought I would be fast, but instead I was slow. We are over. Well, we're already an hour and a half into this, and this is not even the end of the stream. So thank you for sticking around until now. The beta is hopefully going to go live next week. It really depends um, on the technical side. You know, we have to implement a couple of things in Army Forge to make it work. But once it's ready, we will let you know, and then it will run throughout the month of June. So probably until the end of June, June 30th or something like this. Well, it's a Tuesday. Maybe it will run until July 3rd, or maybe I don't know. It will run until, let's say, around the end of June, maybe June 28th or something like that. 3 or 4 weeks for you to play. Of course, like I said before, it's a closed beta. You need to be a patron um, to get access to the app and to have the rule books already available. But if you have a friend that is a patron, of course, they can then, they can help you build an army list using their account, and you guys can all play together without worrying. As we always say, the biggest thing for us with all of our, thing about not sharing PDF content and stuff like that is more like, please don't, just grab copies of the PDFs and put them online. But if you want to use them with your friends and show it to them, that's totally fine. Okay. Okay. All right. That's it for beta talk. Now I'm gonna try and speed run through the rest of this presentation. Oh wait. Did everything freeze? No. Okay. It seems to be back. All right. Let's move on. Okay, so now we're gonna look at minis. So June minis preview. Let's see. There's lots of stuff coming in June, and luckily enough, we have a bunch of renders. So let's start with the orcs. So for the orcs, you are gonna get, I think, five. Usually, you get around 5 different things per month. So first things first is you're gonna get the orc shooters. So these are the iron shooters, of course, because it's from the iron side of the faction. And you get them in two varieties. You get them with crossbows, and they have these really interesting crossbows. And you will see also this design then be reflected in the big. They have a sort of like howdah, not howdah. What do you call it? A big ballista that kind of looks like this. So they have crossbows, or they can of course have bows. Um, a nice little archer or ranged unit for you. They also come with a command group, and so of course you get a sergeant, a musician, and a standard bearer. And as always, you're gonna get them without any hair. You get male versions that are bald. Then you're also gonna get male versions that have hair or beards, and then you get female versions that also have hair. So this is the first unit that you get. Then you're also gonna get the orc leader. So I think last month you got the orc boss, which is the stronger hero, one of the stronger heroes in the faction. The orc leader is your most basic hero. It's 5 up, 5 up, not super amazing, but serves its job to give you a nice aura and bring a little bit more chopping power to your unit. Comes with lots of different weapon options. Comes with different, of course, heads, male, female. Here you can see the axe, you can see the spear, you can see the hand weapon. I think there's also like a dual axe version. So yeah, lots of different options, and this is your leader, your basic leader. Then you're also going to get the Tusk Beast Riders. Actually, one important thing, we have heard your feedback in the community about the scale of the Tusk Beasts. We have gone and reviewed it, and in fact, they felt a little bit too small. So all the Tusk Beasts are going to be rescaled to be 10% bigger. But anyway, here you can see the Iron Tusk Beasts, or the Iron Tusk Beast Riders. On the left side, you can see your basic three poses. Here you can see them with the axe and shield, but they also come with like lances and shield, well, spears and shields. And then on the right, you can see the command group, of course, with a sergeant, musician, and a standard bearer. And yeah, really cool. I have to say, when we first designed the Tusk Beast, when we were thinking about like how do we make mounts that make sense with the lore of our minis. We didn't just want to make boars because they don't. it could kind of make sense, but not fully, because our guys are kind of like originally from the swamps, and so we thought, well, what if we took this concept of tusks and said, well, what if it's a beast with tusks? And so we made this sort of like crocodile-y thing, very much inspired by like a sort of like Louisiana swamp with alligators and crocodiles. And actually, I'm not sure which of the two they have. Um, but whatever, alligators, I suppose. And yeah, and so we got the Tusk Beast. Then you are also going to get the Orc Boss on Tusk Beast. Very cool, I have to say. This one's even bigger and chunkier and has like really big tusks. Yeah, and really lovely with the hero on top. The hero feels nice and chunk, has a cool cape, and of course comes with all the options that you expect, right? So hand weapons, axes, spears, halberds, and of course male, female, bald, all the usual stuff you expect. Very cool, I have to say. Like I had a lot of doubts when we first came up with this concept, and now I couldn't be happier that we actually made it work. Then you're also going to get, I think this is the last thing for the month, you're also going to get the the boss on Tusk Beast Chariot. So we got the regular Tusk Beast Chariot last month. This time you get the hero version. It has a cool banner. It has like a cool hero on it. And of course, then the hero can also be used. I guess you could like cut up the hero and like use it, without, how do you say this? Separately. But whatever, he's kind of like holding onto the thing, so you'll have to play with it to make it work. But yes, a hero on chariot, something we hadn't done in a long time, actually. I think the last time we did a hero chariot was maybe with the mummified undead. I don't remember, but yes. And yeah, you can see it here. Comes with different options as always, different heads, different designs. um yeah. Okay, so this was the orcs. As you can see, by the way, I'm trying to go fast because we've been here for a while. That was the orc side. Now let's talk about the Ratman clans. So the Ratman clans. First things first, you're gonna get the stalkers. The stalkers are basically your melee troops. Here you can see a bunch of their options. So on the left side, you can see them with double daggers, and lots of different things. They have like these masks that they can wear. They come with male versions, female versions. They also come with a buddy and stuff like that. Then on the right, you can see what is called an this is called an electro flail, which is a special weapon that the Ratmen have. Very cool, I have to say. Very, very cool. Again, one of those things, you make it, you draw it, and you think, is this gonna work? And it actually turned out really, really cool. And you can see all the cool details on the miniatures as well, with all the different poses. Then they also come here on the left side. You can see them with the electro whips, and the electro whip is well, again, different type of weapon, different options. And then on the right side, you can see a bunch of the special weapons that they can have. So one of the models in the unit can have like double electro swords, the electro hammer, the electro spear, and then in the back you can see him with the claw gauntlets. So this is the first unit that you get. Then you're also gonna get the Okay, you're gonna get the agitator. The agitator is your sort of melee hero that goes with the um, stalkers. And yeah, it's a cool hero. Comes with lots of different weapon options. Kind of melee base. So you have the big hammer and the spear. You also have the gauntlet. Here we can see the sword. We can see a buddy. Different pistols. Right on the left, you can see the plasma pistol. On the right, you can see the flamer pistol. But of course, comes with more pistol options. And then yeah, he has like this cool backpack with the classic like hamster wheel design from the Ratman, and the sort of like little poncho thing that our Ratmen use as well. Then you're also gonna get another hero, which is the Psy Hacker. Really cool. I have to say, once again, one of those things that you draw it, you don't know if it's gonna work, but it really worked out. And basically, your Psy Hacker is your caster. Comes with different options as well. The masks, the Oh, actually, you cannot see it here. There was a version with a mask, and then there was a version with like a full-on helmet. Has a cool little backpack, reminiscent, since it's a Psy Hacker, reminiscent of the backpack that we saw in the Psy Hacker from the HDF. We wanted to have a little nod there, but of course, this guy uses a cool staff instead because he doesn't need a laptop. And yeah, very very cool caster for the Ratman. Then you're also going to get the rat swarms. You can see them here on the left. For this time, we kind of decided to make a mix of big rats and small rats. We think it came out pretty well. And yeah, you can see like different poses. Like one of them has them like running over a thing. The other one has them on top of like a one of those like round, again, sort of like a hamster wheel from the rats. And then we thought, you're making rat swarms, you got to have a Pied Piper. So on the right you can see the rat master, or the rat swarm master, with its little pipe. And yeah, it was just like a nice little nod. Honestly, it's not even necessary in the rules, but you can use it as a cool extra to your unit. Yeah. Okay, and I think, was that it? Oh no, there's more. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. The next thing you get are the mine drones. The mine drones, again, one of those things that we drew. We were not sure if it was going to work. We think it turned out really well. The idea with the mine drones actually is that they're basically shot by like different artillery pieces, and big mechs and stuff like that. And then they have like little thrusters. You cannot see them here, unfortunately, because they're already pinned in the ground. But they basically have like little thrusters, so they kind of like shoot their thrust, I guess, and so they get dug into the floor, and then they're kind of like floating there as a sort of you know mine, a portable minefield kind of situation. They come with a couple different options, which we thought were cool. On the left side, you can see like a standard one. On the right side, you can see one that's kind of like upgraded to be like a sort of like plasma mine, and then there is another one that is a sort of like flame based mine. They are not different in the rules, but we just thought it would be a cool thing to give you a couple of options, especially if you want to mix and match them so that it feels more varied. And then, okay, yes, and then finally we get to the artillery piece, the Ratman artillery, which is, well, you can see it here. Use the big wheels, which are a bit of a staple of the faction by now. And then has a nice little gunner, comes with lots of different weapon options. Here we can see on the bottom left the missile launcher. Then we have on the top left the heavy machine gun. Bottom right, we have the anti air cannon. And the top right, we can see the plasma cannon. Then it also comes with, I think, a shred cannon and a mortar as well. I'm not sure if there's more versions, but I think that's about it. Um, Comes with a little pilot. The pilot has a couple of options as well. Very cute, very nice. And because it's fun to do, we also decided to make a little sidekick crew member with binoculars. That is a spotter for the artillery. Oh yeah, and here on the right you can see the mortar version. Yeah, nice. Okay, and so with that, we have seen all the Ratman stuff. Now let's move on to the rest of the release. So first things first, StarQuest Heroes. So you are going to get the, oh god, I forget the name. This is the let me double check. Because this is for StarQuest, and in StarQuest the names are a bit different than in Quest. This guy is the. Mhm. Aha! This is the Biomancer. Sorry, I had a brain fart there. This is the Demons of War Biomancer. And yeah, he comes with a buddy. We don't always make a buddy, but usually for the Druids and the Biomancers, it kind of is a bit of their thing. And so he gets a cool little buddy. And yeah, a very cool thing. The whole thing about the Biomancers, they're kind of like sci-fi druids, so they always have these sort of like, they have lots of like little vials of like potions. They have lots of like mists and smokes and stuff like that. Ultimately, they're sort of like wizards, right? And yeah, I think it's really cool. I love the tanks, the gas mask tank thing on the buddy. Very cool. As always, I think quest heroes are super cool, and this would also make for a great, caster in your standard army. Then what else are you gonna get? You're gonna get the large snow terrain. So right now we're going through the snow terrain phase, and we're at the large pieces. These, of course, are the biggest pieces. They are twice the height of a regular model, maybe almost 3 times the height. They come in a variety of pieces, as you can see here. So lots of different trees, rocks. You have snow, of course, everywhere. There's one place with like it's a sort of like destroyed hut with like wooden walls. You know, the regular cool stuff you expect from the terrain. And then once you have the whole set put together, um, it works really well. One thing, by the way, I want to remind everyone that gets the terrain. Some people say like, "Oh, these terrain pieces are kind of small." Well, one of the things that we wanted to do when we decided to change how we make our terrain is, of course, to make sure that the terrain is printable by everyone. And so we made sure that the terrain actually fits on a regular build plate. But if you have a bigger printer, or if you have the skill to like cut, you can, of course, make the terrain much bigger. The terrain was designed in such a way that the scale is not super, let's say, clear or super set in stone. So you could take this terrain, scale it up, 10%, 20%, 50%, 200% if you want some of them. And it will still work really nicely, and that way you can have much more variety in the terrain. So you don't have to have every piece of terrain be exactly the same as the next. You can also have the same piece of terrain like multiple times and scale it up and down a couple of times, and that way you have like a variety of looks on the table as well. Lots of stuff you can do. Okay, then we move on to the legendary. Yes, unfortunately, we didn't have the renders ready yet for the stream, but here is the legendary for June, which is the Orc Marauders super heavy battle truck. Yes, I think we have the battle truck. This is the super heavy battle truck. Whatever. It's huge. It's huge. The miniatures that you're seeing here are not the final poses. These are just some placeholders that we put for the screenshot. But this thing is massive. It is basically, if you have the HDF super heavy battle tank, it's almost the same size, or well, it's kind of the same size, just that their shape is a bit different. It comes with a couple of different weapon options. It has like 2 different cannons that it can use. It has like different pintle stuff that it can have. It has a cool little diorama like caster thing happening in the background, and then of course it will have lots of models all over it, crawling and hanging and shooting and fighting, and very orky, very very orky. Then moving on, we have tier 3. So tier 3 throwback minis. This month we have Duchess of Vinci and Alien Hives. So at this point, well, we'll talk about it a bit later. Anyway, so what do you get? On the left side, you can see the Duchess of Vinci. You're gonna get the Alchemist. This is basically the hero for the Duchess of Vinci. You're also going to get um, the mounted captain. Also comes with a couple of options as far as I remember. Like you can have it like with a handbow and stuff like that. Then you're going to get the Vinci. What are they called? The scouts. They come in 2 different versions. They come as a regular scout version that goes on the ground on the right, and then they also have a version on the left which can fly. And so it's basically like the winged scouts. And then in the back, you can see the scout slingshot, which basically is a contraption that they use to shoot the scouts, and then they glide onto the battlefield. And it actually can be used. Well, it can be used just as a diorama piece, or it can also be used in the game. It has rules, and it comes with a nice little crew with also an Atoma helper and some crewmen and stuff like that. So very cool. On the right side, you can see the alien hives. Now, one important thing is what you're seeing here is a really old screenshot of the alien hives. Over time, these models have been updated, so you're of course going to get the newest updated version that has better supports, higher quality, and so on and so forth. So here you're going to get big beasts, 3 big beasts, in fact. So you're going to get the Toxicorex, which you can see at the bottom, which is basically like a venomous or poisonous version of the Carnivorex. On the top, you can see the Psychorex, which is basically like a psychic slash caster version of the Carnivorex. And on the right, you can see the burrower. This is a really, really old picture. The new burrower looks completely different. It's much bigger and comes with tons of options. And yeah, you're also going to get the burrower, which is really, really badass. Then for tier 3, you are also going to get the 2 legendaries. Basically, okay, so on the left side, you can see the um, Stalker, what is it called? The Stalker Great Terror Beast, which is really big, nice and chunky. It has a big mace tail. It has a crew of I forget what they're called. God, there are so many miniatures. These guys are Reapers. And it also has a cool sort of like epic king on a throne. It's not a king, but like an epic hero on a throne, which has like a big sort of axe glaive kind of thing. On the right side, you can see the. You're also gonna get um, the elemental titan, the ether elemental titan from the human empire, which of course, the human empire has 5 different elements. Each element is represented by a different animal, and in this case, ether is represented by a lynx. And you can see here like a really cool massive lynx with a wizard riding it, and then lots of other details all around the model. Very, very cool. um, and yeah. Okay, one important thing. So, when we first launched Tier 3 back in September, because we knew that the first releases, the first 10 months of releases, would be relatively light on miniatures, at least compared to what people are used to nowadays, we decided to throw in legendaries, like 2 legendaries every month. Now, this is the 10th month in June, so this is going to end, and you're going to only get the actual releases from 5 years ago and not the legendaries as well. Why? Because things are about to get crazy. Starting in July is when, for a while, I think for about 4 to 6 months, we were releasing 3 armies at a time. And so you're going to start getting 3 armies at a time. And as we keep going, you're going to get a bunch of stuff. Like it gets, it grows. So yes, we are very, 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 very glad that people have enjoyed Tier 3. We are very thankful and appreciative of anybody that is part of Tier 3, even those that have decided, or especially those that decided to upgrade to Tier 3 just to help support us further. And they already had the miniatures. Like, thank you very much. And yeah, we hope you enjoyed these 10 months of legendaries, and we hope you enjoy the upcoming months of 3 armies and beyond. Okay, now I have 2 small surprises. I was happy to hear from the team that we managed to pull things through to show you this stuff today. So let's go. Number one, so a long time ago, we started to add buddies to our armies. Of course, we only started that with the Ratmen. Not really buddies, they're sidekicks. When we started adding the sidekicks, we basically started adding them to every army, but older armies did not have sidekicks. And slowly over time, we have been going back and adding. Adding sidekicks to armies, and we're happy to announce that finally, we are gonna have sidekicks for the ED. So, what are the sidekicks for the ED? So the sidekicks for the ED, of course, are drones because their thing is drones, and you get a bunch like 6 different cute little drones that are gonna be sprinkled in your units. So if you already own these models, they're gonna be added for free, completely for free as always. They're just part of your thing. So you're going to be able to download them. I think they're being released tonight, maybe. They're going to be released very, very soon. Let me put it that way. And yeah, you get 6 different types that then you can mix and match, of course. On the left side, we can see one with a banner, very cute. On the right side, one with a tea set and a bonsai, also very cute. They're all very cute, to be honest. Then you're also going to get one that's carrying a bunch of like little plasma cells. Actually, technically, they're not plasma cells. If you've read the Eternal Dynasty faction book, you will know that they actually use this sort of jade, star jade is called, which is basically like this material or this element that they use to power all their weapons. So this guy's carrying a bunch of like little Starjade batteries. On the right, you can see one that's carrying a fusion Oni arm or a fusion blaster or fusion rifle. I don't remember what they're calling it. A fusion gun Oni arm. And this actually, of course, comes with the Oni, so you can have like a nice little guy bringing a backup weapon. Then you're also going to tell. Then you're also going to get the left one comes with the ninjas. So this one has like a cool little like night vision scope, which we thought was adorable. And then the right one, I'm not sure. I guess maybe it comes with a captain. But basically, it has a loudspeaker to let people know what's up on the battlefield. So very nice. I'm very happy that finally these models are being released, and I'm looking forward to releasing the last couple of missing buddies or sidekicks um, for the missing faction in the future. As far as I know, there are 4 factions missing. It is Jackals, Beastmen, Star Host, Jackals, Beastmen, Star Host. I think maybe that's it. Might be those. So there's a couple more missing, and hopefully we're gonna release them throughout by the end of this year. But we have lots of stuff to do, and this is just extra work on the side. That we're doing whenever we have time. Speaking of sidekicks, you have heard me now correct myself multiple times talking about sidekicks and not saying buddies. Why? Well, because technically these are sidekicks and not buddies. Because wait, I feel like I'm making too big of a deal of this. Essentially, so in April with the anniversary, we released the first miniature and some arts of the official OPR Buddy, literally called Buddy. And Buddy is I don't want to go too much into the lore of Buddy. We will slowly reveal the lore of Buddy over time, but Buddy is a sort of Buddy is there. Buddy is watching. Buddy's around. Anyway, and this basically is gonna be the new mascot for OPR. We kind of love the idea. So far we never really had a mascot for OPR. I really love the idea of making something that's nice and cute and friendly, and that feels like you could buy a little plushie of it. Honestly, this is all an excuse for me to get a plushie. But anyway, when we decided to do that, we also decided that from now on, whenever we release a new faction on Patreon, we're also going to release a small little diorama of Buddy interacting with the sidekicks from the faction, and we started working on it. So there we go. Here you can see the little dioramas that are going to come out hopefully next month. It depends. We've been having a couple of issues getting these finished because, again, we have other priorities, but they are almost done. And so they should be coming out soon. On the left side, you can see the Ratman Clans diorama where a little Ratman sidekick is showing off his stash of um, cheese to Buddy. And then on the right side, you can see a version of Buddy hanging out with one of the sidekicks from the orcs, and they're sort of like sharing a bone and cracking it too. Um, Adorable models. Honestly, they're just here for fun. They're just here to be cute. Right now, the models come in real scale, I suppose, which is like, or well, in the games, the scale of the game, so they're pretty small. So you can actually have them as somewhere. But we're actually also thinking of releasing like bigger versions of them. So that then you can like print them and paint them, and like they're a nice little thing to put on your desk or like on a shelf. And we're hoping that over time we will add more and more of these to the collection, and maybe we will also go back and add these for existing factions. But it all depends on how much time we have and so on and so forth. Maybe it's a thing that we could bundle in with like faction books whenever those come out. To be seen. But yes, I hope you enjoy these. Ultimately, they are meant to be cute. Somebody just asked, is that an axolotl? It has been a long-standing meme that there should be axolotls in OPR, and so it is definitely axolotl inspired. It only felt right to um, do this. Um, okay, cool. Now we get to the final part of the stream, which is the Q&A. So how does this work? Essentially, like this, like this. I never know. Whatever. Let's do it like this time. Basically, we sent out a form before the stream where we allowed people to ask questions. So I'm gonna go and answer those questions. Then I'm gonna come back and answer the questions that come after the line that I just posted. So Q&A starts here, and then finally we are going to shut it down. Wait, maybe actually, let me do it the other way around. Maybe this is better. Okay, so let's see. Question number 1: Is there going to be a return of Death Ball? First of it's called Death Ball, but maybe one day would be cool. We're not sure also how it would work. Like on the one side, I think it would of course be cool to have a fantasy version. I think some people would of course appreciate a sci-fi version. I'm not sure if it makes sense. Maybe we could do something cool where it's a sort of like weird multiverse of madness situation where sci-fi meets fantasy and they play together. Maybe we make two different games. That could be interesting, like maybe we make one that's more inspired by like American football, and then maybe one that's inspired by football, I guess soccer. I'm not sure. Then mm, 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 mm. I'm probably only 1 out of 5 people asking about when will we be likely to get some ghosts in fantasy. Not sure. Whenever we make the miniatures, it will be done. Sorry, we'll be making the miniatures at some point, but we don't have an ETA for those yet. Can you make an estimate when we can expect more factions to be added to the Etsy store? Unfortunately, not. Basically, there's a huge thing going on with. Okay, without throwing shade, OPR is trying to make sure to do everything legally. So we have every time we make any sale, we declare VAT, we declare our taxes, we pay our taxes, we do everything legally. When you try to make everything legally, especially when you're dealing with an international business with international sales, it gets complex. So, for the last couple of months, we have been wrestling with essentially VAT reconciliation. And this applies to all of our sales and stuff like that. And so, essentially, we need to fix all of that stuff before we start properly launching and reinvesting stuff in Etsy, because there's going to have to be a lot of fixing of VAT declarations and blah 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 blah. And so that takes time. Unfortunately, it's a huge thing across multiple jurisdictions, and there's different softwares involved and different accountants and different lawyers. It's not glamorous, but it has to be done. When it's done, we will start. We hope soon. We don't know when. Okay, I see somebody's asking how the Furious rule works. This is not really to ask rules questions, so I would say go on our Discord and ask rules questions there. That's not really what this Q&A is for. When will we see the triplification get implemented in the official rules? In September, when v3.6 is released, that's when you will see triplification come out. I love the compatible with OPR program, but I don't know how to find partner sculpts that are intended by the creators to be compatible with first-party OPR units or army rules. I get it's a model agnostic game and we can use any minis we want, but I'd love to be able to find creators making minis with specific OPR units in mind. So if you go on our website, you can go on the news section. In the news section, you can click on there's like OPR compatibility. If you click there, you will see the list of all the creators that are compatible with OPR, and then you can go in there and check out what they do and if they do something that's compatible. with what exactly you're looking for. Since you're looking for something specific, you'll have to do a little bit of digging. But yeah, I hope that helps. I'm not sure. Okay, that's it. Not too many questions this time around. So let's move on to the questions from the chat. All right, chat. So, has work begun on Too Broken to Truth? Where we could be looking for it this year to start on GameFly, etc. Work on Too Broken to Truth has begun. We are hoping that it's released sooner rather than later. If we could release it this year, amazing. But all to be seen. But yes, work on Too Broken to Truth has begun. Um, mm, mm, Any news on Tiny OPR? No, no news on that. Will Jackals get transport upgrade for Great Beast on model? I assume you mean if we will make an update to the actual miniature to show the transport upgrade. No plans for that right now. Will v3.6 heroes get better quality? They seem to be the same as units. No, they will not get a different quality. The heroes are meant to have the quality matching the units that they are joining. A question about the future of Blast. If it has physical range, can a Blast hit two different units if they are close enough? Yes, but be careful. This is specifically for the skirmish games. This already applies to Blast nowadays in skirmish. So this is not a new thing, and it's not coming to the battle games. I think there might be some confusion if I understood the question correctly. When new faction books get made, will they be available for print on demand day one? Probably not day one, but we hope that they will be available soon after. Given that the heroes are starting to get more weapons, will there be updates to the models, including those new weapons? Not right now in the plans, but maybe in the future. Would you consider changes to some of the already hero-focused factions, gangs, guilds, Inquisition, to better fit with all the hero-focused OPR compatible partners? Would you consider changes to some of the already hero-focused factions to better fit with all the hero-focused OPR compatible partners? I'm sorry, I don't really understand the question. What is a hero-focused faction? You say gangs and guilds. How are those hero-focused? Do you mean maybe skirmish focused? So would we consider changes to skirmish focused factions like gangs and guilds to better fit the skirmish focused OPR compatible? I'm sorry, I don't really understand the question. And since we are not considering changes, I guess the answer is no. Then, are the latest Grimdark Future 2D sets going to be added to Wargame Vault Drive through RPG soon? They will be added as they are released. So, I guess yes. It depends. It depends on what you mean. Like if you're talking about like the ones that are being released right now, then no. Like once they are fully released, then they go on Wargame Vault and Drive through RPG. Before that, they don't. Out of curiosity, which country you were surprised that play a lot of OPR if you have that data? I'm gonna be honest. Like when we first discovered that there was a huge OPR and wargaming community in Poland, I was kind of surprised because I guess I never really thought about it that way. But it kind of makes sense. There's a lot of companies out of Poland, a lot of like smaller creators, a lot of really big creators, and big manufacturers that come from Poland. So I guess I should have expected there to be like a big board game slash war game presence. Um, yeah, I guess it's the one that surprised me the most. Okay, so we are at the end of the questions. This stream went over 2 hours. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. I hope you're looking forward to the closed beta as I am. And yeah, if you are at UKG, make sure to check out our stand. If you are near UKG, maybe consider passing by. The next stream will be at the end of next month, around the 25th. Yeah, maybe on the 25th of June or maybe the 2nd of July. Not sure yet, but we will, of course, make an announcement post and you will see it there. I think that's it. Thank you very much, everyone. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye.